All right, buckle up, folks, because today we're diving headfirst into a story that's, well, it's a real doozy.
It's got all the ingredients of a blockbuster thriller. A nation on edge, political turmoil, and then boom, a fiery plane crash.
Yeah, we're talking about the Jeju Air Flight 7C 2216 crash in South Korea.
Yeah.
December 28th, folks. Mark it down because this one's going to stay with you.
What gets me is how this crash is just tangled up with everything else going on in South Korea right now. They're dealing with a whole lot of political drama. And then you add this tragedy into the mix, and it's like, whoa, talk about a powder keg.
That's exactly what we're going to try to untangle today. We can break down what we know about the crash, explore the possible causes, and there's some seriously strange possibilities floating around out there, and then we'll zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Boeing's having a rough time. South Korea's political scene is, well, chaotic, and it all kind of comes together in this one event.
Yeah, buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride.
So let's start with the basics. Flight 7C-2216, a Boeing 737-800, taking off from Bangkok, Thailand, heading to Muan International Airport in South Korea. Seems pretty routine, right?
At first, yeah, it was a normal flight, but then during the descent, things took a turn. The pilots had to abandon their first landing attempt.
And then, bam, they get a warning from air traffic control. A bird strike.
Bird strike. Now I know what you're thinking. Bird strikes, those happen, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're not exactly unheard of. But here's the thing. This bird strike might have been just the tip of the iceberg, you know? There's something else going on here.
Yeah, there's more to this story. Because right after that bird strike warning, the pilots sent out a distress signal. And then, well, the plane, with its front landing gear still up, it overshot the runway, hit a concrete fence hard, and then it burst into flames.
Man, that footage from the crash site, it's just awful. Makes you think about, well, everything, you know?
Mhm.
What went wrong in those last few minutes?
It was a bad one. The impact was so severe that only 2 of the crew members managed to survive. They were pulled from the wreckage in the tail section. 179 people gone.
It really makes you realize how fragile life is, you know? And it leaves us with this huge question mark hanging over everything. What caused this chain of events?
That's where this investigation gets really interesting. Some of the videos seem to show the plane having engine trouble.
Right, right. But then there's the landing gear malfunction, too. It seems like that could be the main reason behind the crash itself, right?
It's a mess. The South Korean Transport Ministry, they're not taking any chances. They're investigating everything, even the concrete fence itself. Like, could a different design, one that breaks away easier, have made a difference?
And then there's the communication between the pilot and air traffic control, right?
Wow.
Always a big question in these situations.
Hmm.
Were instructions missed, misunderstood? You know, those last seconds, every word, every exchange,
Yeah.
it could have meant the difference between life and death.
These are the details that investigators are going to be picking apart for months. They're going to go through that flight data recorder with a fine-tooth comb, listen to every second of the cockpit audio, trying to figure out those last moments, you know, trying to find the missing pieces.
But while that's happening, there's this other elephant in the room, Boeing. They've had, well, let's just say it hasn't been their best year.
Yeah, they've been hit with safety concerns, machinists strike, their stock prices have been all over the place. It's been rough.
And I mean, we got to be clear here, right? The 737-800 that crashed, it's not the same as the 737 MAX.
Yeah.
That's the one that got grounded after those 2 horrible crashes a few years ago.
Right, those were, well, they were tough to forget. But even though it's a different model, this crash still raises questions about Boeing's safety record as a whole. Like, are these isolated incidents, or is there something bigger going on here?
Yeah, makes you wonder. And then to make things even weirder, there was another incident with the Jeju Air Boeing 737-800 shortly after this crash. No one got hurt this time, but guess what? Landing gear problems again. Forced the plane to turn right back around and land.
2 incidents, same model, same airline, and both so close together. That's a pattern that's hard to ignore, you know?
Whoa.
Raises some serious questions about the 737-800.
And what it means for Boeing, too.
Yeah.
But amidst all this talk about mechanics and investigations, it's important to remember, you know, the human side of this. 179 passengers, their families, the first responders who went straight into that inferno. It's a lot to process.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the crew members who survived, he was badly hurt. Fractures in his ribs, his shoulder blade, even his spine. But get this, he woke up in the wreckage, in all that chaos, and he found himself being pulled to safety.
Wow. Can you imagine waking up in that situation, your body broken, and then seeing those rescuers reaching for you? It's incredible.
It really is. And most of the passengers, they were South Korean citizens. 2 Thai nationals were on board as well. The identification process is going on, but it's a long, slow process. Imagine being one of those families, waiting, hoping. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's unimaginable. And a lot of people are calling for the government to step up, to provide more resources, speed up that identification process. Those families deserve answers, and they need support.
Absolutely. This tragedy, it highlights the emotional toll these events take on everyone involved. The families, the community, the entire nation. It's a shared trauma. And here's the thing, this is all happening while South Korea is in the middle of a political crisis, a serious one. We're not talking about some, minor disagreements. This is the kind of stuff that shakes a nation to its core.
Right, like you've got both the president and the prime minister impeached. Impeached. Well, it's not something you see every day. And then on top of that, they declare martial law, the safety minister resigns, and the police chief gets arrested.
It's a lot, all at once. And it makes you wonder, how does a country that's already dealing with all that instability handle a tragedy of this magnitude?
It's got to put a strain on everything.
Yeah.
Resources, communication, leadership. Does it even affect the investigation? The support the families get?
It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely adds another layer of complexity. But in the middle of all this chaos, you have acting President Choi Sang-mak. He goes to the crash site, meets with the families, starts talking about making changes to prevent this from happening again.
Yeah, a little bit of hope in all this darkness. You see someone trying to lead, trying to bring things back together. It's a reminder that even when things are this bad, there's still that human instinct to find meaning, to try and make things better.
It's powerful stuff. And of course, this tragedy, it's resonated all over the world. You've got world leaders offering condolences, support. President Biden, the Prime Minister of Thailand, the UN Secretary General, the Pope, even the Prime Minister of Japan.
It's a reminder that some things, they just transcend borders and politics. There's this shared sense of grief, a recognition that life is fragile, no matter who you are or where you're from.
Absolutely. But let's shift gears for a second and talk about Boeing again. We talked about the rough year they've been having, but this specific crash with the 737-800, not the MAX, how does this impact them? You've been following this whole Boeing saga. What do you think this does to them?
It's a big hit, for sure. You're right, they've been working hard to recover from that whole 737 MAX crisis. Redesigned the plane, updated the software, new training protocols. They're trying to rebuild trust.
And it was working. Slowly, they were starting to get more orders. The stock price was going up a bit. But this crash, it throws a wrench into all of that.
Imagine being an airline executive right now. Maybe you were thinking about buying more Boeing planes. After this, you got to be reconsidering, right? Can you really risk your reputation, the safety of your passengers, with a company that's had this many problems?
It's a tough decision. And for Boeing, it's not just about losing orders. There's the potential lawsuits, more investigations, the damage to their brand. It's a lot to handle.
And what about the people who work for Boeing, the engineers who designed this plane? They're seeing another one of their creations involved in a tragedy. That's got to be tough.
It's a blow. They're back in the spotlight, but for all the wrong reasons. People are asking questions about their culture, their engineering, their commitment to safety.
You keep mentioning that the 737-800 isn't the same as the MAX. Can you break that down for our listeners? Why is that difference so important?
Sure. The 737 MAX, it had this software problem, the MCA system, and that was a big part of those other crashes. The 737-800 doesn't have that. It's been around a lot longer, and it generally has a pretty good safety record.
So why are we seeing these landing gear problems with the 737-800 now?
Yeah.
Just bad luck? Or is there something else going on?
That's the question, isn't it? And that's what makes this investigation so important. They're going to look at everything. Maintenance logs, pilot training, how the planes are built, even the design of the landing gear.
It's like you start with what seems like a simple problem, landing gear, and then it just keeps getting more and more complicated.
Exactly. These investigations are complex, but they're crucial. Because until they figure out the root cause, you can't fix the problem. You can't prevent it from happening again.
So while we wait for the investigators to figure all of this out, what about the rest of us? The people who fly on these planes? What can we do? Just sit back and hope for the best.
We're not powerless. We can demand transparency from the airlines, the manufacturers, push for stricter safety rules, better training for pilots and maintenance crews. We can hold people accountable.
We can do our own research, too. Stay informed, ask questions, make smart choices about which airlines we fly with.
This crash is a wake-up call. It reminds us that aviation safety, it's not something we can just take for granted. It's a process, a fight against complacency, against human error.
And we owe it to ourselves, to the victims of this tragedy, to everyone who flies, to demand the highest levels of safety. Nothing less is acceptable. So we've gone deep on this one. The crash, the impact on Boeing, the situation in South Korea, well, it's a lot to take in. It's not just some local news story.
It's a global event, and it raises some big questions about the future of flying for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone who flies, whether it's for work or vacation, this crash, it hits close to home. Makes you think twice about that next flight you've got booked. But all the risks we just kind of accept when we get on a plane.
And that's kind of the point. This tragedy, as awful as it is, it's a wake-up call. It forces us to look at the systems we rely on, the companies, the rules, the things we do to stay safe.
Okay, so how do we actually make things safer? What can we learn from this crash?
Well, one thing that's clear is we need more transparency in the aviation industry, more accountability. We got to be able to trust the people building these planes, the airlines, the regulators. They're all putting safety first.
But how do we know they are? We can't exactly watch over their shoulders, right?
Right, exactly. That's why we need to demand more transparency. Independent investigations, open access to data, clear communication about any safety concerns. That's a good place to start.
And it's not just about technology either, is it? I mean, planes are safer than ever with all the advances in design and navigation and communication, but
But we can't just rely on technology. The human factor is still huge in all of this.
yeah, like pilot error, fatigue, miscommunication between the pilot and air traffic control, that stuff can lead to disaster.
And it's often overlooked. So how do we address that? Well, better training is a big one. Pilots need the skills to make good decisions under pressure, manage risks, communicate clearly.
And what about pilot fatigue? We hear about pilots working these crazy hours, jet lag, the pressure to stay on schedule. How do we know they're rested and alert when they're flying?
We need regulations, stricter rules about how many hours pilots can fly, how much rest they need, how to manage fatigue. They can't do their best if they're exhausted.
Right, it's complicated. But this crash shows that finding that balance between efficiency and safety, that's crucial. You can't have one without the other.
And that brings us back to accountability. When something goes wrong, who's responsible? The pilot, the airline, the company that built the plane, the people who make the rules.
It's almost never a simple answer, is it?
Nope. Usually it's a whole chain of events, decisions, factors that all contribute. But someone needs to be held accountable, not just for justice, but to prevent this from happening again.
And that's where those investigations are so important, right? They need to get to the bottom of what happened, find the root causes, see if there are any systemic problems, and learn from it. Every aviation accident, it should be a learning opportunity, a chance to reevaluate everything, improve training, and, well, just do better.
And we can't forget about the human cost. 179 lives lost. Families, communities forever changed by this. Their stories matter, and we need to use their loss to make flying safer for everyone.
It's heavy stuff, but it's important to think about. And it's a responsibility we all share, I think, from the people who design the planes to the people who fly in them.
We can't be complacent. We can't just assume that flying is safe because someone else is taking care of it. We all have a part to play.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's just take a minute to think about everything we've talked about. The lessons learned, the questions we still have, the challenges ahead.
This crash, it shows us just how fragile life is, how complicated the aviation industry is, how connected we all are. And this story's not over. The investigations will continue. But this is something we should keep thinking about even after the news cycle moves on.
It's a reminder that safety isn't some endpoint, it's an ongoing process. And it's something we got to work on together.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it gave you something to think about, maybe even started a conversation about the future of aviation.
And as always, you can find all the sources we used in the episode description. Check them out, learn more, stay informed.
And if you found this deep dive insightful, hit that subscribe button. We'll be back soon with another story, another complex issue to unpack, another deep dive into the heart of the matter. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.